I came home from a business trip expecting hugs from my wife and kids. What I got instead was divorce papers, a demand to give up my house, and a confession that shattered my world. I had no idea that was only the beginning, and that 10 years later the truth would be even worse. Hey everyone, welcome back and thank you for being here with me again. Before I dive into today's story, I've got a quick but exciting announcement. A good friend of mine just launched a YouTube channel called Soulful Tales. It's a place where they'll be sharing intense, real-life inspired stories about betrayal, heartbreak, and deception. If you enjoy the kind of stories I tell here, you'll definitely want to check it out. Show them some love, give a like, subscribe, and let them know I sent you. The link's in the description. Alright, let's get into it. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I'd heard that phrase all my life, but it never carried much weight for me, at least not until life decided to give me a front row seat to its meaning. I've always tried to live by one simple rule: treat people the way you'd want to be treated. Integrity wasn't just a word to me, it was the way I built my entire life. I never lied to anyone. I never spread gossip or tore someone down behind their back. If there was a disagreement, I handled it with patience, logic, and respect. When I messed up, I owned it. When I was right, I didn't throw it in anyone's face. That was me, steady, dependable, and fair. So tell me, how does a man like that end up watching his world collapse in the most brutal way imaginable? My name is William Billy Capps, and I was blindsided. No warning, no preparation, just a blindfolded punch to the gut that I never saw coming. If there were red flags, they were so faint I didn't notice. I was too busy living life, trusting the people closest to me. It all unraveled in a single moment. I had just returned from a 2-day business conference in Texas, tired but feeling good about how it went. I unlocked the front door of my home expecting the usual: my wife Casey greeting me with a smile, my kids running up for hugs. Instead, I stepped into something strange. Casey and the kids were huddled around the kitchen table, laughter bubbling up like they'd just heard the funniest thing in the world. It was warm, loud, and oddly out of place. "What's so funny?" I asked, setting my bag on the floor. The second the words left my mouth, the air changed. The laughter faded, like someone had flipped a switch. Casey looked straight at me, her face unreadable, and after a moment, she motioned toward the empty chair at the table. "Billy, why don't you sit down?" she said. It wasn't a gentle suggestion. It was a command. And for reasons I still can't explain, my stomach dropped. I pulled out the chair and sat down, still trying to figure out why my wife's voice had that sharp edge to it. Casey slid a thick stack of papers toward me, fanning them in the air for a moment before slapping them onto the table with a sound that made my stomach tighten. "Read these," she said. Her voice was steady, cool, almost too steady. It had the kind of practiced calm that made me think she'd been running this scene through her mind for a long, long time. I frowned, reaching for the top page. The words at the top nearly knocked the wind out of me: divorce petition. "I'm not asking for much," she continued without missing a beat. "Just the house." I was still staring at the first set of papers when she slid another pile toward me. "And these," she added casually, "are adoption papers. I want Jeff to adopt the kids." The name hit me like a punch. Jeff. My voice cracked before I could stop it. Casey let out a long, irritated sigh, as though my confusion was an inconvenience. "Yes, Billy. Jeff. The man who's been making me scream while you've been out working yourself to the bone every day." My brain froze. I couldn't even form a reply. 12 years of marriage, 3 kids, a life we built together from nothing, gone. Tossed aside like it was nothing. I looked to my children, hoping for at least some kind of reaction. My oldest, Devin, just smirked like he was enjoying the show. My daughter, Joy, didn't even bother glancing up from her iPod, the glow of the screen apparently far more important than the implosion of her family. Only my youngest, Patrick, spoke. "Dad, Jeff has a huge house and we all like it there," he said brightly, as if that somehow made what I was hearing acceptable. I stared at them, at all of them, searching for some rational explanation. Maybe Casey had been drinking. Maybe she'd snapped under some kind of stress. Maybe, God help me, this was all some twisted prank. But no. Her eyes were clear. Her posture was calm. She was in complete control. When I didn't speak right away, she gave a little shrug, scooped the papers back together, and tossed them onto the kitchen counter. Then she placed a check in front of me like it was just another piece of mail. "Here's your half of the bank account. Take it and go." Before I could move, before I could even breathe, the kids jumped up at her signal and started hauling my bags toward the door. My life, 12 years of it, was being packed away without my say. It took me a few seconds, but I finally found my voice. "Casey, this is my family home. My parents let me live here long before you and I ever got married. Your name isn't on a single document. You're not taking my house. Her expression barely changed, just the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth. Fine. We'll go. She turned toward the kids without hesitation. Pack your things. We're going home, to Jeff. I felt my fists ball up at my sides. My pulse was hammering in my ears, but I forced myself to speak evenly. Who is Jeff? Casey rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with irritation. I already told you, he's the man I've been sleeping with while you've been out working. She said it so lightly, so matter-of-factly, it might as well have been a comment about the weather. My stomach twisted. I looked at my children, our children, searching for some flicker of doubt, some hesitation, anything that would tell me they still cared. But there was nothing. Finally, Joy spoke up, her eyes never softening. Dad, Jeff can give us a better life. Mom loves him and so do we. Her brothers nodded without a second thought, like this was all just some sensible decision. Something in me broke right then. I could feel the pain, the anger, and the betrayal swelling inside me, threatening to spill over. But I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply stepped aside and gestured toward the door. Then go. They didn't hesitate. Bags in hand, they walked out as if I were a stranger. As Casey reached for the car door, I snapped. Don't touch that car. I paid for it and it's in my name. She didn't argue. Instead, she glanced at the kids and together they gave me one last smirk. Then, almost in unison, raised their middle fingers. A moment later, the front door slammed and I was alone. I stood in the silence of that empty house, my hands trembling. 12 years, gone in an instant. Everything I'd built, everything I'd loved, ripped away by the very people I trusted most. And so, I did what a broken man does when there's nothing left to hold on to. I drank. Bottle after bottle until the world blurred, until I collapsed on the cold tile floor beside the washing machine. For the first time in my life I felt real hatred, not just toward Jeff, that smug man who had stepped into my life and stolen my family, but toward the people I once would have laid down my life for. The people I once called family hadn't simply left me, they had tossed me aside as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience, something to be swept away and forgotten. The next morning I woke with a pounding headache, my mouth dry and bitter from both the whiskey and the regret. But beneath the haze I knew exactly what I needed to do. I called a lawyer and arranged a meeting. Sitting across from him, I slid the divorce paperwork over. He studied it quietly, flipping through page after page, and then looked up at me. Billy, he said, my advice? Sign this before she changes her mind. She's not asking for child support. A hollow, humorless laugh escaped me. Of course she didn't want my money. Jeff had more than enough to cover anything they could possibly need. So I picked up the pen and signed. Within months, the divorce was finalized. My former family didn't glance back and neither did I. Instead, I poured every ounce of my energy into work. I went back to school, grinding through long nights and early mornings until I earned my master's degree, and then my doctorate. In time, I became Dr. William Capps, a respected and in-demand accountant for high-net-worth clients. My life, once shattered beyond recognition, was rebuilt, carefully, piece by piece. Not for them. Not to prove anything. For me. Somewhere along that road I met Patty. She was everything I'd been searching for, driven, intelligent, and with a sense of pride in caring for the home we shared. She loved the same things I did, from long walks on quiet evenings to the satisfaction of a perfectly balanced spreadsheet. Patty was slightly taller than Casey, with graceful curves that seemed to draw every eye in the room, but it was her warmth and loyalty that truly set her apart. By the end of my firm's 4th year, business was booming. We had grown to the point where expansion was inevitable. Instead of throwing more money into rent, I decided to make a long-term investment and purchased a 5-story office building. Patty and I loved the new headquarters so much that we made it part of our history. We held our wedding on the 4th floor. It was a small, joyful gathering with only close friends and family. Laughter, music, and a sense of fresh beginnings filled the room that night. And maybe we celebrated a little too enthusiastically, because just a few months later Patty came to me with a smile that said it all. She was pregnant. I would have loved nothing more than to simply enjoy those quiet years with Patty, just the two of us building our life together, but life, as it often does, had other plans. Before long it wouldn't just be the two of us anymore, we'd be 3. For more than 6 years, everything had been on an upward climb. My business was thriving, my marriage was strong, and my home was finally filled with the kind of peace I'd once thought I'd never have again. Which is why it hit me like a brick when, out of nowhere, a process server showed up at my office with legal papers. They were from Casey. She was demanding double alimony, $3,000 a month in child support, And, just to really twist the knife, an additional $432,000 for what she called missed opportunities during our marriage. All this while she had spent the past several years living it up with Jeff, the wealthy man she'd left me for. I couldn't help it, I laughed. 7 years without a single word from her, and the first contact she made was to demand money. I handed the papers to my lawyer. He read them, shook his head, and then, after letting out a laugh of his own, picked up the phone to call her attorney. What he learned didn't shock me in the slightest. Casey was broke. Completely bankrupt. Somewhere along the way she'd caught wind that I'd built a successful career, and that knowledge had apparently bruised her pride and reawakened her greed. Worse for her, she also found out that I'd remarried, had a child, and that another baby was on the way. As for her grand love story with Jeff, it had unraveled. Turns out, moneybags, Jeff enjoyed every luxury and thrill of their relationship, except the part where he was expected to be a full-time husband and father. One day, without warning, he simply walked out. A week later, Casey herself was served with divorce papers. And Jeff wasn't done. Through some slick legal maneuvering, he managed to annul his adoption of Casey's kids, claiming he had signed those papers under duress. With her finances destroyed and no wealthy benefactor left to lean on, Casey set her sights on me again. But she didn't come to me directly. No, she decided to drag my parents into it. That's when I learned something that cut deeper than I expected. My parents had kept in contact with her ever since she'd left me. I could understand, at least on some level, why my parents wanted to remain connected to their grandchildren. Blood ties can be powerful. But what cut me was the secrecy, the way they had kept it hidden from me all these years. Casey had played her part well, stepping into the role of the regretful wife who had simply made one terrible mistake. My parents bought the act without hesitation. My father was the first to confront me. He came with a lecture on forgiveness and doing the right thing, telling me that if he were in my place, he'd bring the family back together. I reminded him firmly that I already had a family. That Casey had not only betrayed me, but that her children had turned their backs on me without a second thought. None of that mattered to him. He brushed aside every point I made, telling me to man up and fix my marriage as if Patty, my actual wife, was some temporary distraction instead of the woman who had stood by me for years. For the first time in my life, I felt my respect for my father fade. I walked him to the door, opened it, and told him to leave. A few days later, my mother came by. She didn't come to talk, she came with an ultimatum. If I didn't take Casey back, I would need to move out of my home so they could give it to her and the kids. I just stared at her, trying to process the words. These were my parents? Thankfully, my business was doing well, so I didn't waste time arguing. I started looking for a new home. Within a week, I had one lined up. Then, almost like clockwork, an eviction notice arrived, giving me 30 days to vacate. I didn't fight it. Coincidentally, the closing for my new house was scheduled for the very next day. It's amazing how quickly the paperwork moves when you pay in cash. My parents moved back into their old home a week later, only to find it stripped bare. Casey and her children moved in the very next day, as if they'd been waiting for the keys. I haven't spoken to my parents, Casey, or her children in over 2 years. Meanwhile, Patty and I have been thriving. We now have 4 children of our own, a beautiful home, and a business that's stronger than ever. This year, I was honored with the title of Businessman of the Year, and a local newspaper ran a photo of me standing on stage, my smiling family by my side, during the award ceremony. When I stepped up to the podium that night, holding my award, I dedicated every ounce of my success to Patty, the woman who had been my anchor, my partner, and my unwavering support through every storm. But before I could finish my speech, the heavy doors of the hall burst open. My parents walked in with Casey right on their heels. She stormed onto the stage like she owned it, her face twisted in mock anguish. In a voice loud enough to carry through the entire room, she accused me of abandoning our children. Her voice cracked as fake tears welled in her eyes. Then she pointed a trembling hand at Patty and declared that she had been the one to destroy our marriage. The audience began to murmur, some in shock, others clearly unsure of what to believe. Fortunately, my lawyer had been expecting something like this. Without a word, he stepped forward, reached into his jacket and pulled out a small remote. A click later, the lights dimmed and a projector flickered to life on the back wall of the hall. A video began to play. The grainy footage showed Casey in a parking lot, speaking with her lawyer. The room fell into a stunned silence as her voice filled the hall. On the screen, Casey laid out her plan to have the adoption papers I'd signed, at her own request, completely annulled. She promised her lawyer that if he succeeded, he would be handsomely rewarded. Then the video took an even darker turn. Casey began describing a vile scheme to have Patty drugged and assaulted, on camera, so she could send the footage to me hoping it would destroy my marriage. Gasps echoed through the hall. As if that weren't enough, she went on to brag about manipulating my parents, using their desire to see the grandchildren as leverage to keep them on her side. When the video ended, the room was frozen in disbelief. Casey's lawyer made a move toward the exit, but he didn't get far. The police chief, who happened to be in attendance, placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. Several judges present had already begun making quiet calls, their eyes locked on the incriminating footage still frozen on the wall. I glanced over at my parents. Their faces were pale, their expressions hollow, as if the foundation of their reality had just been yanked out from under them. Turning away, I found Patty and our children in the front row. I helped them with their coats, guiding them toward the doors. Outside, under the cool night air, I kissed my wife and got the kids settled into the car. Just as I climbed into the driver's seat, I heard my parents calling my name. I didn't turn around. I closed the door and drove my family home. The next time I saw my parents was in a courtroom where they sat across from me, this time as witnesses testifying against Casey and her lawyer. When I stepped out of the courthouse afterward, the air felt heavy with everything that had come before. My father was standing there, his face lined with regret. "Billy," he began. "I can't begin to tell you how sorry your mother and I are," my father started, his voice carrying a note of desperation I hadn't heard before. "But please, son, give us a chance to make things right. You have 3 children who miss you, who are suffering without their father. And we have 4 grandchildren we've never even met." He swallowed hard, his eyes searching my face for even the smallest sign that I might bend. "Son, you've got to find it in your heart to forgive us. Bring everyone together again, the whole family." I met his gaze for just a moment before looking away. My feet carried me toward the courthouse exit, but halfway there I stopped. Without turning around, I said quietly, "I'll think about it." In the months that followed, justice took its course. Casey was sentenced to 3 months in jail and 4 years of probation. Her not-so-brilliant lawyer didn't get off nearly as easily. His license was permanently revoked for conspiracy to defraud the justice system, as well as for his own attempts to deceive me directly. Then the Department of Child Welfare contacted me. If neither I nor my parents took custody of the children from my first marriage, they would be placed into foster care. I told my parents plainly, if they wanted to take in those ungrateful kids, they were welcome to do so themselves. My father sighed, shaking his head as if I were the one who didn't understand. "Someday, Billy, you're going to have to forgive them all," he said. "Is it really so wrong that your mother and I want to be part of our grandchildren's lives? We're not getting any younger. We won't be here forever." His tone softened. "With your marriage, you just walked away and moved on. But what about us? Are you really so heartless that you can't see she made a mistake?" I let out a slow breath, feeling the last threads of my patience stretch thin. "No, Dad," I said evenly. "There's nothing wrong with wanting to be in their lives. But you're wrong about one thing. Casey didn't make a mistake." "She didn't make a mistake, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "She made a choice. Casey was a cold, calculated woman who finally got exactly what she deserved." I straightened my shoulders and locked eyes with him. "And as for the kids, they didn't get tricked into anything. They chose him. Willingly. They walked out of our home without looking back, without even a flicker of hesitation." I took a step closer. "Remember, Dad, you used to tell me there are some things in life that simply can't be forgiven. You also warned me that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Have you forgotten your own words? Because I haven't." A humorless laugh escaped me. "And then what happened? You turned your back on me. Mom did too. Casey lied, deceived, and poisoned the kids against me, and instead of standing by me you stood with her. Which meant you stood against me, against Patty, and against the family I had built from the ashes." I shook my head. "And now you want me to pretend none of that ever happened? No, Dad. You and Mom made your choice all those years ago. And now, you live with the consequences just like Casey did. That conversation was 10 years ago. In the time since, Casey never learned a thing. She remarried, and, true to form, tried to pull the same kind of deceit on her new husband that she had pulled on me. But this time the fallout was far worse. Her husband came home unexpectedly one day to find her in bed with another man. Something inside him snapped. In a blind rage, he tied them both to the bed, doused them in gasoline, and set the match. What was left of Casey was so unrecognizable that she had to be identified through dental records. As for our children, Devin and Patrick kept walking the path they'd chosen. That road led them both to prison where they're serving long sentences. Joy, however, She found the courage to turn around before her life spiraled completely out of control. She sought redemption, and for her sake, I hope she truly finds it. Joy eventually came to our doorstep one afternoon, her eyes downcast, her voice trembling. She asked, no, begged, to be part of our family again. It was Patty, with her generous heart, who urged me to listen. She told me she believed Joy had been led down the wrong path by her mother's influence, and that we should give her a chance, to guide her, to show her a better way forward. And so we opened our home to her. Before they passed away, my parents were given the chance to meet our children with Patty. In their will, they left everything in my hands, trusting me to divide their belongings fairly among all 7 of their grandchildren. Now, Patty and I are standing on the edge of a new chapter in our lives. Before long, the house will be quiet, our children grown, gone out into the world. We'll be parents of an empty nest. And when that day arrives, I plan to cherish every moment alone with my wife, the woman who stood by me when the world seemed determined to break me, just the 2 of us again. I know there will be people who think I was wrong for not fighting harder for my first family, for walking away without trying to piece it back together. But here's the truth, some things in life simply aren't worth the fight. Thank you for hearing my story. If it resonated with you, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed, left a like, and shared your thoughts in the comments. We'll meet again in the next video. In the end, life didn't turn out the way I once imagined it would. I didn't keep the family I thought I'd grow old with, and I didn't get the closure I once believed I needed. But I gained something far greater, peace. I learned that blood alone doesn't define family. Loyalty, love, and respect do. And while the past will always be a part of me, it doesn't control me anymore. Patty and I built something real, something lasting. Out of the ashes of betrayal came a life worth living. We've raised our children with the values we hold dear, and when they leave our home to start lives of their own, we'll look back knowing we gave them the best we could. And as for the rest? They made their choices, and they lived with the consequences. So did I. Some doors are better left closed, and some battles aren't worth fighting. Not because you're weak, but because your life is worth more than the pain of reopening them. But just when I thought the past was buried for good, a letter arrived. It came in a plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single page, typed, not handwritten. No greeting, no signature. Just a few short lines that made my chest tighten. You've always wondered why your parents defended Casey. It wasn't just about the grandchildren. Casey knew something about them. Something they couldn't let get out. She kept their secret. They kept hers. That's why they turned on you. Look deeper. At the bottom was a date from more than 20 years ago, a date that meant nothing to me. Or so I thought. Later that night, I pulled out old boxes of family records, photographs, and letters. I searched for hours, piecing together fragments until the truth began to take shape. And when it did, I sat in silence for a long time. The reason my parents had clung to Casey all those years wasn't just blind loyalty, it was fear. She had stumbled across something from their past, something that could have destroyed not only their reputation but their freedom. She'd used it as leverage, and they'd paid for her silence by standing against me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had betrayed me to protect themselves, only for Casey to meet a far worse fate in the end. I folded the letter, locked it away in my desk, and decided that was where the secret would stay. Some truths serve no purpose once they're uncovered, except to hurt the people still left behind. That's my truth. That's my ending. Thank you for listening. If my story struck a chord with you, subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you in the next video, maybe with a story that's not about endings but about beginnings.